Hello and welcome to today's webinar, COVID-19 TCA Regulatory Update and How to Move Your Orientation Class Online. I am Marilyn Serber, a Transportation Advisor with Tenstreet, and we are really excited to bring you a great lineup today, including a surprise announcement, so make sure you stay tuned all the way to the end. This webinar will be recorded, and it's going to be emailed out to you within 24 hours along with a PDF version of the slides. So we are so excited to have our friend Dave Heller with us today. Dave is the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Truckload Carriers Association and is responsible for communicating and interpreting all trucking-related regulations, safety, legislative and otherwise, to the membership of TCA and our congressional representatives on Capitol Hill. He also offers his own quarterly webinar to TCA members about important industry updates. Thank you, Dave, so much for joining us today. And I actually think TCA has a webinar this afternoon on some of that stuff. So we're excited to have Dave today, and we are going to jump right in and get started. We will answer questions after Dave's session and then also at the end. So feel free to put your questions just in the questions chat and we will get to them. So without further ado, take it away, Dave.
Thanks, Marilyn. Good morning, in some cases, good afternoon, and it's good to be here. I will consider this a win if I can make it through this whole presentation without my dogs barking, which is a kind of a testament to the environment we're working in. But my first slide I do want to point out is thank a trucker. They're representing the tip of the spear when it comes to dealing with this coronavirus, and they're going into the places that are quarantined, that are shut down, and there's a lot of questions towards their movement. But at the same point, you can see that there's been a underlying movement to thank a trucker, or hashtag thank a trucker going on. And I give kudos to them out there for doing these things and keeping our store shelves stocked and going to places that many could go. So I had to give that ovation right there just to start off. Whitney, if we can go to our first slide, that would be absolutely fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah. One of the biggest questions I'm getting right now in this time is basically questions regarding travel advisories and going into areas that primarily are quarantined, are shut down, specifically this CDC advisory from New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And our drivers out there are questioning whether or not they do have the ability to go into these environments. And the CDC pointed out that there is a travel advisory, but if you read right there, it says not limited to trucking. So that kind of outlines the fact that drivers should be allowed to go where they need to go to make their deliveries because they're delivering important goods. And the CDC is not the only folks that are doing this. If we can go to the next slide, you'll notice that DHS, or CISA, which is the Critical Infrastructure Security Advisory Agency, the next slide, has issued an essential critical infrastructure worker, and they've issued actually version 1 and version 2. And it's interesting to note that because version 1 came out on March 19th, and they highlighted transportation employees as employees supporting or enabling transportation functions. And when they first came out with this first version, many people thought, okay, where's truck drivers? And they believed that it included in that. But now you can see version 2, the language on transportation, is employees supporting or enabling transportation functions, including truck drivers. It's fair to point out, and this is a great example of this, is because a lot of carriers are taking this language and putting it and allowing drivers to take that with them in the opportunity that they are traveling into, say, California, for example, or New York, for example, places that are closed down during these times, so that they are highlighting the need that those drivers need to be there. They're delivering critical goods that are essential to restocking the shelves of our grocery stores, our pharmacies, things of that nature, that has supplies that need to go where they need to go. Now, what's interesting to point this out, and this highlights the very nature of what's going on in DC right now, and I use this word, I think I've used the word fluid so many times within the last 3 weeks that's basically what we're talking about. Is this environment is so fluid right now when it comes to agency interactions. And there's even an announcement that came out roughly about 30 minutes before we went live on this webinar that I'll share with you when I get to the appropriate slide. But fluidity is what we're talking about, because they'll issue one thing and then it'll lead to questions, and they'll either update what they issued, as you can see what DHS has done right here from version 1.0 to version 2.0, by just including the words including truck drivers. So they're eliminating any ambiguity there so that they're making sure those enforcement officers know that these drivers are allowed to enter certain areas. So as we deal with this whole virus situation and the things that are going on with the American economy, it's important that trucking be recognized and move forward with delivering the goods that our nation so desperately needs. Whitney, if you can take our next slide up. You can see right now, and I highlighted this on the first slide, here's kind of the nature of where we have been. If you look at the beginning of the March, I think we as an industry were focusing on hours of service and the changes we were expecting because the rules went to review at OMB, and that's the White House Office of Management and Budget. And that was our standard course, right? That's where we were as an industry. We were looking forward to changes from hours of service regulations. We were looking forward to getting them on the street. OMB had roughly about 90 days to review it. So that was our timeline. That's what started ticking. Roughly about 2 weeks later, we started dealing with coronavirus things. Coronavirus just exploded on this country. It exploded in trucking. And on March 18th, FMCSA issued its first emergency declaration and issued the dates of effective until termination of the emergency or until April 12th, 2020, whichever occurs sooner. And here we are, we're on April 3rd. So we're dealing a little over a week of where this comes out. A week and a half later, that April 12th is going to happen. So the question becomes, and they'll start having these conversations already. In fact, I know they're having them right now, is where will we be on April 12th? I think obviously we've seen the news, we've seen the number of cases seem to be exploding throughout the country. So I think they'll revisit this issue and talk about where they're going further. Again, I have to say this, FMCSA has been very proactive since this original declaration on March 18th. In fact, they issued a follow-up declaration that got a little bit more specific, and they're issuing FAQs. If you take it to my next slide, they're issuing FAQs that are addressing some of the questions that industry has. And don't be afraid to communicate that. I can't emphasize that enough. But those questions certainly are coming fast and furious. First and foremost, here's what they issued, and this is version 2.0. This is their most recent, what they're calling declared loads. Obviously, medical supplies and equipment, equipment necessary for safety, sanitation, prevention of community transition, food, paper products, and here's where they start getting into some interesting things, because the first version of this didn't include precursor raw materials such as paper, plastic, or alcohol, but what also is included as precursor raw material would be livestock, for instance, cows to make ground beef and steaks and what have you. So now that actually is now included in the emergency declaration. Fuel is another example, because as we crept more into this virus situation, there had been rumors of fuel shortages. And I say rumors because that's kind of one of the things they start dealing with, is you start seeing rumors pop up in certain geographic regions. And that's primarily what they're dealing with. And they're acting on the fly, or basically the fly being a government speak, because up until this point, nobody ever confused the government for acting quickly. And by quickly, meaning they'll issue one notice and a couple of days later go back and issue a different version of that notice. So I can say you're sitting there thinking you have it all under control, and then a couple of days later, they'll have a different notice out there, or an updated version. So it's fair to point out, to pay attention, that you need to be paying attention to just as much as any and all of these things. I think even more important, and Whitney, if you go to that next slide, more importantly, there's some of these things of what isn't a declared load, because many of the carriers out there right now are actually holding or operating under declared loads. And some of these things that are not declared loads would be direct assistance, that would be routine commercial deliveries, including mixed loads with nominal quantity or qualifying of emergency relief. And I think that's kind of one of the things we're talking about, mixed loads with a nominal quantity of qualifying emergency relief. So let's say you have a load of toilet paper, for lack of a better word. You have a load of toilet paper that's going to, I'm going to ballpark say Walmart, and then there's actually 2 lawnmowers on there. That would still be a declared load, because even though it's a mixed load, the majority of that freight on there would be considered emergency relief. So we've gotten a ton of questions on that as well. And my phone had been ringing off the hook when these declarations first hit. And it's fair to point out that last sentence at the very bottom of this slide, where it says carriers and drivers are encouraged to operate within the spirit that the declaration was intended. And I think that's kind of a very good sentence, in that they're meaning that, hey, let's go about this the right way. We recognize that everybody in the nation is having some issues, and let's make sure we're not taking advantage of the declaration. You know, one of the things that this declaration does is lifts the hours of service regulations for those drivers that are hauling declared loads. There are carriers out there that aren't going by that declaration. They're sticking to standard hours of service regulations, and others that are obviously driving beyond the scope of the hours of service regulation. So it's fair to point out that the agency is expecting the industry, and by all accounts, the industry is abiding by that statement. They're going down the road of, hey, let's do this the right way. Let's make sure, because nobody, it doesn't help anybody if one of these trucks gets into an accident on the way with a declared load. So in saying that, this is one of the things that is an example. There's questions galore out there when it comes to some of these things. One example I was told about not a declared load is, let's say you're hauling a load of tires. That would be the car tires, for instance, is probably not going to be classified as a declared load because it wouldn't be emergent in nature. So it's one of these things we do have to pay attention to what we are indeed hauling on the trucks if we are going to take advantage of that. Now, it's fair to point out too, and I put 2 links down here, and they will make this website of this webinar available to those after the fact, but those 2 links right there contain both versions of the FAQs, again, highlighting the very essential that FMCSA has actually been very fluid in the conversations about these issues. And those are the first 2 versions and the only 2 versions that exist right now in terms of FAQs for these declared loads. And they've been proactive in having these conversations. They're actually moving forward and continuing to entertain questions by all stretch of the imagination. I probably send them at least an email every day talking about issues that are starting to pop up as a result of some of the exemptions and waivers that they've actually issued for COVID-19 hauling. So in saying that, these 2 links right here will be pretty important. They do add some light to some of the questions that do pop up, and I wanted to put them on there. And I didn't want to take up too much of your time getting into it, but I do provide you the links so that you have a good ballpark of what to go by. Whitney, can we hit that next slide? Whitney, can we get to the next slide?
Hey, I am on the next slide. I think there might be just a slight delay.
Fantastic.
We're on the hours of service.
Got it. That's all right. There's a couple of questions that seem to pop up specifically for those that are declaring or hauling emergent loads, is how to log. And this is one of those interesting things. If you had asked me when we were talking about at the beginning of the month, if you had asked me how would you log something like this, or what's your opinion on personal conveyance, I think many of the folks or many carriers out there have a very concerned theory regarding personal conveyance, but yet that's one of the options that FMCSA is providing to carriers on how to log some of these emergency loads trips. And that would be one personal conveyance, which this function will result in the time being recorded as off duty and will require an annotation at the end of the trip. But personal conveyance, they are advocating that you do take that when you're logging these trips, because like I said, in some cases, that ELD is still going to pick up those miles. It's still going to record those miles when those wheels are rolling. So the ELD will do that. Another option they have provided is use the ELD in its normal mode, and the ELD record will indicate they were driving under emergency relief. They'll notate that at the end. And then finally, turn off the ELD altogether, in which case the carrier would address the unassigned miles in accordance with the current regulations, which mean notating at the end in the back office. So those are the 3 options when it comes to logging, but they are advocating for that personal conveyance issue, which is one of those things. Other impacts to hours of service, and it's fair to point out there's a couple things here that really come into question here. Number 1 being the 30-minute break, and provided the load qualifies as emergency relief, if it is a load of toilet paper, paper towels, antibacterial soap per se, food to restock the shelves, provided it qualifies as emergency relief, that driver would not be required to take a 30-minute break. The 60 and 70 hours rules, that's that 60 and 7 days, 70 and 8 days hours rules, or portion of the hours of service. None of the direct assistant loads will count toward that weekly recap. So when you're looking at that issue, it's almost, when it comes to these loads, it's almost as if the emergency load does not exist in terms of hours driving. What is important at the end of the trip is basically the 10 hours of recuperative sleep or rest that they have to take on the back end. And again, this is if they're hauling emergency loads that are going beyond the scope of the current hours of service regulations. But it would be the entire trip that classifies that from start to finish, not just hours that may be over beyond 11 hours drive time. Let's say it's 13 or 14 hours drive time. That entire trip is classified as an emergency trip and would not go toward the weekly recap. And the same can be said for the 34-hour restart. If you're hauling direct assistant loads outside the scope of hours of service, that driver will just need to take that 10 hours off duty, not the full 34-hour restart. So this is kind of some of the options in which the agency is providing industry in order to get these declared loads or these emergency relief loads to market. Whitney, if you can hit the next slide. There are special obligations or some of the things the agency does want to know. Specifically, number one is if there's an accident when you're hauling these emergency loads, and communicate these things to FMCSA. There is a website right there that, or an email address that you can provide that following information, date of accident, city or town, because they obviously want to make sure that safety is paramount still, even with the waiving of the hours of service. They want to make sure that safety is still being abided by, and they want to check the boxes in terms of any accidents that may occur, in which case, there it is. That's kind of what they're looking for. You can put it in an email to that email address and go from there. So it's kind of driver's name, license number, vehicle, number of individuals. They want to just make sure you're reporting all those DOT recordable accidents, and then they're keeping track of any of these that are happening under the emergency declaration specifically, and they want to do this within 5 business days of an accident. So that's kind of one of the things they're requesting right there. Next slide, Whitney, would be fantastic. There it is. It is important to communicate with FMCSA, specifically when it comes to these declared loads. When we talked about the first couple of slides, when we talked about the CDC recommendation, DHS, and heck, even at the beginning of the week, FMCSA piled onto those declarations and said, here's what we're expecting, and we want drivers to be able to get anywhere they need to go to make these deliveries. They are asking for information that if you do have drivers that get held up, where are they being held up? For instance, had a driver earlier in the week that was entering Florida during its shutdown, and it was an open deck vehicle, and they were putting the open decks in the right-hand lane along with other vehicles and letting the box vans just drive straight through in the left lane. So they want to know information like that. They want to know city, state, and route, and they want to know what the driver's hauling. So if you do get drivers that are held up, it's important to know, please forward that information to me. I know the agency's looking for that information so that they can actually address that in a case-by-case scenario. So if this turns into a problem, if medicine is not getting to where it's needing to go, if Purell is not getting out there, if food isn't getting to the store shelves, they want to be able to note that specifically as we get further into this virus and more areas start going under that lockdown or shelter in place type of scenarios. They want to make sure the drivers have the ability to continue on and get their loads to where they need to go. So if on the phone, if you are encountering these issues, shoot me an email. I'd love to know more about it. I can forward that information on to FMCSA if there's scenarios. But again, it's important to note city, state, and route and what the cargo is going to be. So if it is tires, okay, then there's going to be an issue there. But if it's toilet paper, okay, then that's something the agency needs to talk about. Other waivers that have actually been issued, CDL, CLP, and med cars are set to expire after March 1st, valid through June 30th. It's important to note that obviously as we get into this virus, some DMVs are shutting down and are preventing drivers from re-upping their CDL or re-upping their CLP. Drivers must have been physically qualified beforehand. Couple of things that have happened since this waiver is issued is I know carriers out there have some apprentice type programs. I know they've waived the opportunity for the CLP holder and the CDL holder. That CDL holder no longer has to sit in the passenger seat during trips. So the CLP holder can move on, provided they've made all the adjustments and passed all the qualifying tests. Now, here's the one thing, and one of those things that we talked about is there may have to revisit this as we get longer into these virus or emergency type loads. because some of these CLP holders don't have the ability to go get their physical CDL. They may have passed all the tests, they may have passed the written exam, they just don't have a physical CDL, at which case then it would free up as time goes by, they pass the appropriate carrier necessities and are able to fly solo, they just don't have the physical CDL. So this is something that the agency is talking about. Again, there's nothing new yet to do this. However, I can literally say about a half hour before we got on this call, FMCSA, which is the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Administration, who governs hazmat loads, issued a notice that would allow states to issue an extension to expiring hazmat endorsements. What made that so tough to get through was hazmat endorsement requires a background test, and if it expires, they have to do another background screening. But they have issued a notice literally 30 minutes before this phone call came out that would allow states to extend that delay or extend that expiration date. So there's a notice that just came out 30 minutes ago. Like I said, this is going to be, it's a fluid situation. So again, those are limited waivers regarding medical card and expiring CDLs. Whitney, next slide. Which should bring us to our drug testing and what's going on with the drug testing, because again, as we're looking at drug testing, we're looking at drivers and carriers who may send drivers to get a drug test, if you will, and that drug test site or collection site may be closed. So there is some opportunity here. For instance, random or reasonable suspicion testing, please document why a test was not completed. If the laboratory was closed, that would be one reason why. Specifically when it comes to random programs, while the regulation states spread it out equally over the course of the year, if something does come up that allows it not to happen, they have specifically stated you can make up your drug testing or random testing on the back half of the year while we get through this coronavirus. Because some of these labs, even President Trump had mentioned in some of his speeches that some of these labs are actively partaking in coronavirus testing, and drivers don't want to be exposed to some of that testing. So they're going that route. Now, new hires, there has to be a negative pre-employment drug test result. So if you have a new hire and you don't have a drug test result, they need to get one, and they need to have a negative result that goes in the clearinghouse, if you will, in order for them to drive, because they can't operate in a safety sensitive function without having that negative result attributed to them. So it is fair point. There's some guidance there that goes. It was issued March 24th, and it was in regard mostly for random testing programs that can be completed on the back half because you're experiencing problems with your test collection sites. Whitney, Marilyn, that's all I got. Happy to have some questions if there's any.
Thank you, Dave. We appreciate you, and make sure you give your dogs a treat, because I didn't hear one bark the whole
Neither did
time.
I.
So that's
Thank goodness.
We do have a couple questions. One question came in about steel loads. Would that be considered direct assistance or not, Dave?
That's a great question, and by steel, it depends on what the load is for, to be honest with you. If it's just fulfilling a warehouse, I would venture to say probably not, but depends on what the steel is. I know I had one carrier call me that was delivering steel to help with emergency hospitals that were being erected. So then at that point, yes, it would be a declared load. So it would depend what the steel is being used for.
Great, thank you. Another question is, if they have dispatch in the building, do they have to do social distancing?
Social distancing is an encouragement. It's kind of one of those things that it's not necessarily, it's guidance. It's encouraged. It has had an effect on the spread of the virus. So I think that's just good practice. There's no particular law out there, unless it's really in the quarantine areas, that say you should be forced off, and they're probably limiting things. And this is where kind of it gets into your area of basically class sizes and orientation and what have you. So there are some social distancing parameters that you should abide by. It's just good practice at this point when it comes to the spread of the coronavirus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know some states are putting out specific instruction for businesses as well, so you might turn to your state. Dave, just a funny thing, has anyone ever told you that you sound like Vince Vaughn?
I don't know who's put that in, but no, nobody's ever told me that. I do get a lot of looks on or comments on my appearance of Stone Cold Steve Austin, but no, first time I got Vince Vaughn.
All right. So another question, could a load of cleaning products that is delivered on a dedicated basis every day by the same driver, is it excluded from the emergency declaration on the basis of being a normal commercial delivery?
And this is one of those ambiguous gray areas that they're talking about, because that's what everybody is using. So I don't think you're going to get much pushback if you were operating in an emergent type of manner, because it's probably needs to get there as soon as possible. So I think it would classify as an emergent or declared load.
Okay, great, thank you. And those are all the questions that we have for Dave right now. And so
Great.
if anybody has any other ones, we will do another question section at the end. And so, Whitney, if you want to go to the next slide. Just as in trucking, you know, we have to keep on trucking, right? And so we know that the show must go on, that you guys still have to hire drivers and you still have to onboard drivers and get them trained during this crazy time that we're all living in. And so we really want to show you at Tenstreet how we can help you do that safely. We know traditionally that you bring new hires into your office to provide orientation, but as this virus continues to spread, we know that people are moving to more digital platforms, and we want to offer those services to our clients free and to drivers for free for 90 days to help you put in those practices of social distancing and limiting group size. According to a recent look at our driver data, application volume is on the rise, meaning we can expect trucks to fill at faster rates than usual. To help carriers hire employees safely and get much needed drivers on the road faster, carriers can now easily move to these solutions that allow remote onboarding for drivers. We're so lucky today to have our client success advisor and that does the best job that I know of demoing these products, Whitney Snyder. So she's going to walk through them with us. But we do have what we're offering for free for 90 days, our DOT and tax forms and proprietary videos. Our biggest time saver, this solution allows drivers to complete digital forms, training videos, and tests from their mobile devices. We offer countless standard DOT and tax forms such as I-9 and the W-4, 7-day logs, and we'll upload your proprietary training videos for free as well. We're also including a COVID-19 travel disclosure form to help in protecting all parties from the evolving coronavirus health crisis. This now free service also picks up where the Intella app left off by auto-populating orientation forms with information already entered in on the application. This continues to relieve drivers from the burden of entering information more than once, expedites form filling, and ensures consistency in response. This free services also include the Confirmation Intella app. This recruiting and onboarding tool removes the back and forth drivers and recruiters experience when updating a driver's application with all the required details. Once all the updates are made by the recruiter, this tool sends drivers a final recruiter modified version for their application. Drivers review the information, they confirm and sign the updated application from their smart device, and it's returned right back into the driver's file. We are also including Document Uploader, and so just like the name implies, Document Uploader allows drivers to take photos of their documents, CDL, Social Security card, all of those documents with their smartphones, and upload the images directly into the Express dashboard. So, and then our final product, I can get to, is our new proprietary training videos that Whitney is going to demo everything for us. So I will turn it over to you, Whitney.
Thanks, Marilyn, and thank you, Dave. I have to say that I'm loving all of the comments. It seems to be unanimous that Dave does sound like Vince Vaughn, so I think we're all in agreement there, Dave. And I have to echo your sentiment that it'll be a win if we don't hear my dogs snoring in the background today. Maybe not barking, but snoring. So I'm excited that I get to show you guys some new functionality on top of functionality that we've offered that maybe you haven't seen before. So let me transition over. Alrighty, so whenever you are ready to schedule forms or a course of documents for Doc Uploader or electronic courses, videos, quizzes to a driver, you'll pull them up just like you normally would. So the person that I'm going to work with today is Gunner Snyder, which so happens to be one of my dogs. So once I have Gunner pulled up, it's really simple to schedule the courses to her. So I can go to Process, Add Process, and then from the Select a Process dropdown, you'll have a new option called Schedule Communications. If you don't have this currently, it's because it's not configured for you yet. I click Schedule Communications and then hit Start. So in this pop-up, I'm going to be presented with all of the different courses that I have available to schedule together. So of course, that's what we call it on the Tenstreet side, but I like to think of it as a packet or a task that we're sending to that driver to complete. And so there could be a single request behind the name, so upload CDL, that would just send that to Gunner. Or I could have something like driver forms, which is a packet of requests to send to her. It helps save me time so that I don't have to individually request every single thing that I want her to do. And so this is configurable on every client. So everybody who has this gets to set it up to meet their own specific needs. So once I select the specific request that I have for that driver, I can click a due date. So maybe I have her coming into orientation next week. So I'll do the 8th. And then the expiration date is just the date that those tasks will no longer be available for her to complete. So it automatically will just say a month out. Then you can choose who you want to receive notification. The trainee would be the driver. And then if you want updated as it goes along, you can also click notify enroller here. So I'm going to go ahead and just click finish. And so now what is occurring is that the driver, if they have driver pulse, they're going to get a slide in notification letting them know, hey, you now have some tasks to complete. If they don't have driver pulse, no big deal. They're getting an email that takes them into the driver portal to complete those tasks. So today what I'm going to show you is from driver pulse, simply because that is where the majority of the drivers are going to be completing these from. So here is a look into this driver's driver pulse, and we can see it's really straightforward for the driver. We have a task list. So that packet that I sent had 9 different things. I'll talk about the 10th one here in a minute, confirmation and tele-app. But it's just a list of different tasks that I need to complete. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the W4 just because it's the quickest for me to show in a demo. So what's really cool is that once I click on that specific form, it's going to show me a preview. And bear with me just a second. Okay, so it's going to show me a preview. For some reason, it didn't load that time. But it's going to show me what I'm going to fill out so that the driver is not just inputting random information. They get to review the entire form before they start inputting. So I can scroll through, I can see what it is I'm filling out. And then when I'm ready, I simply hit fill out form. So here, there's going to be a combination of fields that are going to be either required or not required. The required are going to have a red asterisk, and the person would actually not be able to complete the form if they haven't filled out all of those required fields. And so that's really great from a standpoint of the user on your side. You're not going to be receiving forms that have blank spots that you needed filled out. So it's going to help you obtain accurate documentation. And we're also going to pre-fill a lot of data for the driver so that they don't have to data entry a ton. So we can see here my name, social, address, those fields that can kind of become annoying to type over and over again as they often show up on multiple fields. Those are going to pre-populate from the application. So I'm going to just keep on trucking through here. At the bottom, I'm going to sign, and then I hit save. And then from here, I'm going to be able to see the form that I have completed in case, like maybe I accidentally put an answer that was wrong. I didn't realize what the field was for whatever reason. I can review the entire thing first before I submit it over to the carrier. So then I hit finish. And now that task, I'm going to go back to my task list, and that task is going to be checked off of my task list. So it's kind of nice if you're a list type of person, you get a little bit of fulfillment from seeing something checked off of the list. And from the user standpoint, now I'll show you here in a little bit that that document is already in the dashboard for you to review in the document section for Gunner. So document upload from here, it would be super simple. I would click on it. If I'm on a mobile device, it will link actually to my camera or my stored files. If I'm on a computer, it's just going to link to my stored files, but those are super simple. But that's not what everybody wants to see right now. I'm sure what everybody would like to see, just based on the fact that I know I've been asked forever if we're going to have our own training content. So I would assume what everybody would like to see right now is our training content. So what's really cool about our training content is that is going to live in the same area as your documents. So for you to be able to send it out, it can be in the same packets as everything else, and it just kind of mixes in here. You can see that it's called training, but otherwise it's in here with everything else that you're needing the driver to complete. So I can click on my defensive driving, which happens to be the course that I've been scheduled. And with our training content, it is going to be mobile friendly. Of course, we do everything mobile first here at Tenstreet because we know that that is where the majority of the drivers are completing everything. So this is going to be super friendly for any device that they complete it on. And my favorite part is that it's actually interactive. And so if you've ever sat and watched a super long video and then had to remember answers to quiz questions, that's not exactly the best user experience. And so we designed this with the driver in mind. So I won't play these just because I'm not sure how great the audio will come through, but when I play here, it is a snippet of information for the driver to listen to. And then you'll see that as I scroll down, it's quite pretty to keep the driver's attention. Honestly, I think that I would be way more likely to read this than if all the font was the same. Once I go down, I continue to have interaction. So another piece of information that's recorded, and then I can click through here, distractions, merging, changing lanes, speeding. I continue to scroll down, more information for me to take in, but not so much all at once that it's overwhelming. And then this is my favorite part, and I'm not very good at this because I don't drive, which is probably a good thing for everyone. Another interactive piece to the puzzle. So drag and drop, got that one wrong. So there are quizzes that can be made part of this so that the driver will have to, show that they understand the information that they've just watched. Another really great thing to this is that if the driver has to leave at some point, they can return to the same point in the training that they were previously at. And so I know that I've heard this sentiment before that you have to start over. It's not saving the place. So our content will allow you to get to a certain point, maybe go take a lunch break, come back and be at the same place without having to restart the entire training. So that's super exciting. And then additionally, you're going to have the ability to see the progress for the driver on the videos on the user side. So you'll always know where the driver is in their training. If maybe they're taking a little bit too long, you can call them up and say, hey, I see that you're at this point. I need you to get this second half done or whatever. So there's a lot of really good information, and we really focus on making sure that the information is something that's easily digestible, that the driver will want to complete and will be able to do so and stay engaged. So that is the training content. Now I'm going to flip back into the dashboard side. I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions about the training content, so I'll try to make this second part quick. It's not quite as exciting, but I do at least want to showcase the rest of the free onboarding package in general. So once a document is completed, it's going to automatically funnel into the document section for that driver. So we can see here, I already have the W-4 saved for Gunner, and I can open it in a PDF format. We have countersign abilities as well. So if you have a form that needs countersigned, it can come right back in, and the internal user would be able to countersign here. Okay. So we have a view that allows you to see where a driver is with everything that you've scheduled them. So it's called the portal view. And here I can see that Gunner has completed the W-4, but everything else is still pending. So this is something that comes with the tools. And then you also have a tool that we won't talk much about, but I do at least want to show that you have the ability. It is a management tool that allows you to search for what pending classes or courses that you have for all drivers, as well as the ability to cancel them if you accidentally scheduled something for the wrong person. I mean, not super likely that it would happen. However, we still want you to have the ability to cancel those. So this tool will allow you to do that. Okay, so really quickly then, I know there's a lot of questions because I can see them about the training content. I'm going to show you the last piece real quick that comes with this. It's called Confirmation in TeleApp. And so every carrier that I talk to, they have the issue of a driver fills out the application, and then in the process of processing that driver, they learn that maybe something on the application needs updated. Maybe a period of service that they input was not quite 100% correct, or their address was wrong, whatever it is. So I hope that everybody's aware that you have the update info button, which is the way that you can internally make updates to the application. So here I can come in and I can make updates to any section on the application. Looks like it's taken just a second to load. Here we go. So let's say that, just for ease of the demo, Gunner's address was wrong. She flip-flopped the 0 and the 8. So I can hit finalize changes, and now I have a new application version for Gunner. So in order for me to have a compliant signature on that new application version, I can schedule what we call a confirmation in TeleApp. So it follows the exact same process that I just walked through, where we go to add process, schedule communications, and then there's a little delay. It'll be confirmation in TeleApp from this list. So I ahead of time scheduled this for myself. So exact same process. Once Gunner has been sent that course, she'll get an email. It'll be in Pulse for her, and it'll be a task called confirmation in TeleApp. And she'll do the task just like she would any other task that you have scheduled to her. And so she'll be able to review the information on the application, say yes. She can say no if for whatever reason it's not, but we're going to hope that it's right. I can sign off on all the different sections in case there were changes there. And then exactly like the form, I have the ability to sign off on that, and then it will come in as a new document called Confirmed in TeleApp into her dashboard. So super simple, very easy. The technology on the signature is the same as it is on the application. And like I said, all of this is mobile first. So these documents present themselves in a way that's really easy for the driver to do from a smartphone. All righty. That is what I have. So Marilyn, I'll kind of give you the controls now because I know that we have some questions coming in.
Yeah, we have some questions, so I'll ask the questions. Dave, we do have one more question for you. Let me get back to it. This is about public works personnel that are getting priority testing in some states. Have you heard any word on whether drivers will be able to receive priority COVID-19 testing?
I have not heard anything on prioritizing COVID-19 testing, with the exception of healthcare workers like nurses and doctors that are working in hospitals. That's the only priority testing that I've heard of. I haven't heard of anything for truck drivers at this point.
Great, thank you. Okay, Whitney, this question is for you. Is there a way when we assign stuff to drivers that they can get a text instead of an email for the notification if they do not have the Driver Pulse app?
I don't believe that that's something that we can do today, but we can make note of it. I don't know if Elizabeth happens to be on, but that is something that we can look into. At this time, no, it's via email or Driver Pulse right now.
Great, thank you so much. And there's a couple of questions about this that's kind of about custom content. How do they upload their own documents, or if they have other documents outside of what we have available in the free onboarding? So the way you guys will get those documents to us is you'll want to reach out to your advisor after this if you're interested in this, or your account manager, or you can email sales@tenstreet.com and they can work with you to get you set up with the free services, and then also get you some pricing on what it would look like to get your custom documents built and into the system so you could also assign those to drivers. Whitney, do you have anything to add there?
No, that's perfect.
Okay. Thanks. And then about the training videos, are they available without the uploading document onboarding stuff? And so, yes, if you want to try the free training videos, again, reach out to your advisor or email sales@tenstreet.com and we will get those ready for you. We can send out a list of the available training courses. We can get that. We can probably include that in the email that we're going to send out with this information. And then we have a question about, is our training content from ProTread? This is not the training content from ProTread. This is our proprietary training that we have developed in-house. So you will assign it directly through your dashboard like you do any other forms or communication. Here's a question about uploading a training video and a corresponding quiz if you wanted to have your own quiz associated with the content. Whitney, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, so we can do your own training videos. We'd have some discussions around if you own the rights to those, but generally speaking, yes, you can upload your own videos and then provide us with the corresponding quiz to get set up to be shown in the portal and to be able to be scheduled with other forms.
There's a question about what happens when a driver doesn't have a smartphone. Well, all of this technology is mobile first, so it's designed to be done on a phone because we know that that's where drivers are filling out applications and doing a lot of these things, but it can also be done on a desktop or an iPad or a tablet, whatever kind of device that the driver does have.
And it would be very similar, Jeff, to what I just showed. So I just showed Driver Pulse through a desktop, but there is a portal that you can link them to if they have an email address, and it will allow them to complete everything just the same.
Okay. There's a question about the I9. regarding how valid it is if it's not signed and the ID is not confirmed in front of a supervisor.
So on that one, this is Taylor. I'm happy to be on here to answer these questions. Our product is I9 compliant, but as far as right now and how things are being handled, the Department of Homeland Security has issued some flexibility announcements in relation to this COVID-19 crisis. And so they've specifically said that for employees that were onboarded using remote verification, that you can indicate in your I-9 form in the little box for additional information that they have not been reviewed yet pursuant to COVID-19, or you could just put COVID-19 in that little additional information. And then they have indicated that within 3 days after business operations resume, and there's, there can be in-person verification to get that verification in person within 3 business days. But you can still send out the form, get it done. You can still have them make copies, take a picture of the documents and have everything done, and then on that, and it's signed through our system. And then on that, when all of this is over and you're bringing people back into the office, get that verification of their identity and see those in person.
Thank you, Shannon, so much. See, it was important for you to be here. Dave, we have another question for you. Is there a place you can direct us to find the information about the Hazmat update that came out today?
I believe FMCSA is about to issue something out. It may also be on FMCSA's website, TCA itself. We will be posting it shortly as well. It may have already been posted while we've been on this phone call. I know we're kind of focusing on being a clearinghouse for all these government releases. So if you go to TCA.org or truckload.org, you'll see our COVID-19 webpage, which will have all that information. So I know that's being worked on, being posted as we speak. So you might want to go there. If not, I'll happily send it to you. Just shoot me an email at dheller@truckload.org and I can forward it to you as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that. Another question that I think you might know something about is, have you heard anything that the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse isn't letting people buy queries?
Well, no, I haven't heard anything about that. No, that's the first one by me. That I can make an inquiry about, but I haven't heard that it wasn't letting anybody purchase queries at this point in time.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll do some research on that, and if that is the case, then we'll get some kind of messaging out about that. Great, thanks so much.
And then I just want to say, for those that are listening that use our clearinghouse services, since we're on the webinar and have your attention about some compliance issues, we have had a couple of our clients that do use us for the clearinghouse as their TPA reporting that they've gotten some emails about registering for the clearinghouse, and they're essentially spam emails. So if you're our clients and you use us for the clearinghouse and you're getting spam emails, please feel free to reach out and let us know if you are concerned, or if you don't think that those emails are correct. They're saying like you haven't registered and you haven't done things and you need to be doing. And so please feel free to reach out, or just ignore those spam emails that you might be getting related to that.
Thanks, Shannon. Dave, one more question for you. What is the expanded expiration for the CDL and the med card?
They haven't expanded it yet. This is pure speculation on my part, is that they will expand it at some point as they get closer to the expiration date. If only because if you're looking at some of these prognostications, I know in Washington, D.C., they just announced that peak period for COVID-19 is going to be mid-July. So I imagine if that follows the same track that the rest of the country is going to, I think the agency is going to have to readdress some of these expiration dates in which they've issued these exemptions. So that will all be time-based, if you will. So as we get into it, I would imagine they would probably re-examine on what some of these dates would be on emergency declarations and waivers that they've issued.
Great. Thank you so much. And we are approaching the top of the hour, but we do have one more question about the I-9 electronic signature that looks like it came out after your response. So just can the I-9 be signed electronically? They thought it had to be signed in person.
No, no, it can be signed electronically. It does not have to be signed in person. There's nothing that says that it has to be signed in person. You do still have to see the documents in person. But no, and if you, whoever asked that question, or if anybody else wants the information, I can send out a link that specifically addresses that. But they do follow and recognize the e-sign act, and that can be signed electronically.
Great. Thank you so much. Any questions that we did not get to, we will send out the answers to those questions. We're going to send a list of the training videos with the recording so that everybody can see a list of the content. We have 20 videos in the library right now. We're actively working each week to add new content to the library, so we do expect that to grow every week. Thank you so much for everybody staying on to hear about our great surprise. If you're interested in the new training library or the free onboarding offer, please reach out to your advisor, your account manager, or email sales@tenstreet.com, and we will talk to you about all of that. Again, we're really excited to support the trucking industry in this time and offer this proprietary library. We've had clients ask us to develop this kind of stuff and do this for years, so we're excited to get it off the ground. Thank you for spending a little bit of your time with us today, and don't forget to download the handout, which is the PDF of this webinar. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of your Friday.